Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're diving into the world of graph analytics.
Really interesting stuff.
Yeah, and forget about, those simple pie charts we always see. We're talking about mapping out entire universes of data to try to find like these hidden connections that most people miss.
And it really is powerful stuff, especially like you said, when we think about how much data is out there. It's not just about collecting all this information anymore, right? It's more about understanding how it all connects. That's where graph analytics comes in.
Yeah, that's so true. And it makes me think of that idea of 6 degrees of separation. You know how people say we're all connected by just 6 relationships?
Oh, absolutely. And with graph analytics, it's like that. But instead of finding out, you're connected to Kevin Bacon, we're talking about like really important stuff like exposing fraud rings or making global supply chains more efficient.
Exactly. And the really cool part is we're lucky enough to be like diving into real-world examples today. For the team over at Eastridge Analytics, they're actually using this technology right now to help companies uncover some pretty incredible insights and make more money.
Yeah, it's pretty wild when you think about it. Like 6 degrees of separation started as this like thought experiment, but now it's like fundamental to how we analyze data.
Yeah, so let's break that down a little bit because I get the party game version of 6 degrees. But how does that actually translate to, data analysis?
Okay, so imagine this massive web. Each piece of data, whether it's a person, a bank account, a transaction, whatever it is, each of those is a node. And the connections between those nodes are the threads that link them all together. And graph analytics basically helps us see those threads even when they're not super obvious.
So it's all about finding those sneaky connections that traditional methods might miss.
Yeah, exactly. Like let's say investigators are looking at 2 suspicious bank accounts. On the surface, they might not seem connected at all, right? But then graph analytics comes in and can actually reveal that both of these accounts are part of a much bigger fraud ring, even if it takes a few steps to connect them.
And those steps are where the 6 degrees come in.
Exactly. Each connection is like 1 degree of separation. And what's really amazing is that you can actually write a relatively simple graph query to uncover those connections.
Oh, it's simple query? Are you saying I could, expose a fraud ring from my couch with a little bit of code?
Well, you might need a bit more than your couch and some code. But you get the idea. There's this language called Cypher that's really popular for these types of queries.
Yeah.
So, for example, let's say you want to see if 2 bank accounts are connected within 6 degrees. Let's call them account A123 and account B456. The Cypher query would look something like this. Maxi's path, shortest path, A account, Deja's 6B account, where A account equals A123 and B accounted equals B456, return path.
Okay, I'll be honest, that looks a little intimidating to me.
I know it seems like that, but it's not as scary as it looks. Basically, that query is just asking the database to find the shortest path with a maximum of 6 hops between those 2 accounts. And if a path exists, even if it's a really roundabout one, the query will find it and expose all those hidden connections.
Okay, that's actually really cool. So you're saying that with just 1 line of code, investigators could unravel a whole web of deceit.
Exactly. And believe it or not, we're just scratching the surface here. Graph analytics can get even more powerful when you start using advanced techniques. Things like graph embeddings and graph neural networks, which are also called GNNs for short.
Ooh, embeddings and GNNs. It sounds like we're stepping into a sci-fi movie here. Can you break those down for us?
Okay, so imagine this. Every data point, like let's say a purchase you make online, imagine that gets transformed into a special code or a vector that captures its most important features. This code, this embedding, basically represents the core of that data point in a way that computers can easily understand and compare. It's like a fingerprint that reveals a data point's hidden personality.
So if I'm constantly buying sci-fi novels and retro video games online, my embedding would reflect those interests.
Exactly. And then you take all these fingerprints, these embeddings, and you feed them into a graph neural network, which is basically just a really powerful learning algorithm. And it can analyze all these embeddings to find these incredibly complex patterns in the data.
Patterns that even the most experienced data analyst might miss.
Oh, absolutely. These patterns could be anything from predicting which online transactions are likely to be fraudulent to identifying like the weakest links in a global supply chain.
Wow, so we're not just passively observing data anymore. We're using it to anticipate the future. That's a total game changer.
It really is. And the exciting part is that you can apply this to so many different fields. In fact, Eastridge Analytics used this exact technology to help a major bank prevent millions of dollars in losses from fraud.
Okay, now that's what I call putting theory into action. Tell me more about what Eastridge did.
So this bank, they were facing a ton of fraudulent account activity, and they had been trying to combat it using more traditional methods, but it seemed like the fraudsters were always a step ahead. That's when they decided to call Eastridge Analytics.
It's like the cavalry coming in to save the day, armed with algorithms.
So how did Eastridge actually use this GNN technology to fight back against the fraudsters?
Well, they implemented a GNN-based system that could analyze these massive amounts of transaction data. Like, we're talking huge amounts of data. And it would look for these really subtle patterns that might indicate fraudulent activity. It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack. That's what traditional fraud detection methods can feel like sometimes. But Eastridge's GNN was able to sift through those haystacks really quickly and really precisely, and it was able to identify those needles, those fraudulent transactions, with a much higher success rate.
So they were basically able to connect the dots and see patterns that would have been impossible for a human to spot just by staring at spreadsheets and transaction logs. Exactly, and the results were really impressive. The bank saw a huge decrease in fraudulent activity, which ended up saving them millions of dollars in potential losses.
Now, that's what I call a return on investment. It sounds like Eastridge Analytics really knows what they're doing, but we've been talking a lot about big banks and huge corporations. Is graph analytics only accessible to these big organizations with, massive data science teams?
That's a great question, and the answer is no, not at all. While graph analytics can get super sophisticated, the beauty of it is that you can actually start pretty simple and then scale up as you need to.
So even if you're not a coding whiz, you can still benefit from this technology.
Oh, absolutely. Even just running basic graph queries can give you really valuable insights. Remember that example we talked about earlier, tracking a product's journey through the supply chain? A small business could totally use a similar approach to understand their own supply network. They could identify potential risks or bottlenecks, and maybe even find faster, more efficient ways to get their products to their customers.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's all about working smarter, not necessarily harder, by understanding the relationships in your data, no matter how big or small that data set may be.
Exactly. And then as a business grows, it can gradually incorporate more advanced techniques like those embeddings and GNNs we were talking about earlier. The key is to just start with a solid foundation and build from there. It's kind of like starting with bicycle and then gradually upgrading to a rocket ship as your needs and your understanding evolve.
And just like you wouldn't build a rocket ship without, a team of expert engineers, you don't have to navigate the world of graph analytics alone either. That's where companies like Eastridge Analytics come in, right?
Exactly. They're not just experts in the technology itself, but they also really understand how to actually apply it to solve real-world business problems. And they work with companies of all sizes. Plus, they have this proven track record of tackling these really complex challenges, whether it's reducing fraud for a financial institution or optimizing the supply chain for a global manufacturer.
And speaking of accessibility, I was checking out their website, and they have a pretty bold guarantee. Something about a fully deployed Neo4j database and pattern discovery in just 60 days, or they work for free.
That's right. It just goes to show how confident they are in their ability to deliver results. They've been there, done that, and they know they can make a difference. That kind of commitment is rare these days.
It definitely sounds like they're putting their money where their mouth is. They're not just talking the talk, they're walking the walk, and you don't see that every day. So for those listening, what would you say is the key takeaway here?
I think the biggest takeaway is that there's this hidden value waiting to be unlocked in the connections within your data. Whether you're a small business owner just trying to understand your customers better, or a large corporation dealing with complex supply chain issues, graph analytics can give you the insights you need to make smarter decisions and get better results.
It's like we've been handed this treasure map. But instead of leading to buried gold, it's guiding us to a deeper understanding of our data and all the hidden relationships within it. And the best part is we don't have to go on this treasure hunt alone. With experts like Eastridge Analytics by our side, we can navigate the complexities of graph analytics and unlock the true potential of our data.
That's a great analogy. They can help you navigate the terrain, anticipate potential challenges, and ultimately reach your destination.
This has been an incredible deep dive, and I feel like we've only just scratched the surface. But before we wrap things up, what's one thing our listeners can do today to start exploring the power of graph analytics in their own lives or businesses? Give us that final push before we go. What's one thing our listeners can do right now to start tapping into this whole graph analytics thing?
It's really about shifting your perspective a bit. Instead of just looking at those data points as isolated pieces of information, start thinking about the connections between them, Ask yourself what kind of relationships might be hiding in my data that I'm just not seeing.
So like if you're a bookstore owner, instead of just looking at your sales figures, you should be thinking about which books are usually purchased together or which authors seem to attract like similar types of readers.
Exactly. Those connections can tell you so much about what your customers really want.
Yeah, you could use that to make better recommendations,
Yeah.
curate your inventory more effectively, or even make your marketing more personalized. It's like you're suddenly seeing this hidden picture emerge just by connecting the dots.
It is. And just like a picture can be super revealing, the results you get from graph analytics can be just as powerful, even beautiful in their own way.
It's true. It's like putting on a special pair of glasses that let you see the world of data in a whole new light.
And the coolest part is this journey of discovery never really ends. The more you explore those connections, the more you'll find. And you'll be amazed by the hidden patterns and insights that emerge.
It's like you're constantly unlocking these secret levels of understanding.
That's the beauty of graph analytics. It's not just some tool, it's a completely new way of thinking about data and the world around us.
I love that. Well, listeners, I hope this deep dive has inspired you to go out there and uncover those hidden connections in your own data. And remember, with a little curiosity and the right guidance, you too can become a graph explorer.
Absolutely. And if you're feeling adventurous and want to take your data exploration to that next level, remember Eastridge Analytics is just a click away. They're the graph gurus with a guarantee you really can't beat.
And we'll be sure to include a link to their website in the show notes. It's been awesome diving deep with you today. Until next time, keep exploring, keep those questions coming, and keep those data fires burning.